My name is Nancy Knowlton, and I'm the president and CEO of Nureva. Prior to this, I was the president and CEO at Smart Technologies for 25 years. I like to joke and say that even murderers get paroled after 25 years, so somehow it's just seemed appropriate that I leave Smart after 25, so you insert the laugh now. A little bit about my background as well. I have many degrees, undergraduate, graduate, and also I became a chartered accountant, all from the perspective that I wanted to have my own business, so I felt getting the background in education was a good thing. Well, you know, this whole thing about COVID and going back to the office has been very much start-stop. And first, now we're going back, hey, we've got to get ready, oops, we're not coming back. And so I think a lot of people imagine projects and then they put them on hold. We certainly saw that. The projects didn't disappear, they just got slowed down. And now I would say that people are believing that they're going to go back to the office, back to the classroom, but that doesn't mean everybody all the time. So now there's this hyper alertness to hybrid, the positive aspects of it. You'll hear lots of people talk about things like equity for the remote participants. I'm not sure that it'll ever be equal, but at least it will be better than it was now that CEOs have been remote as well. They're not going to accept it when it's a very poor experience. So I'm very optimistic about where things are going, and it's coming from a number of different fronts. Geographically, it seems that every place is kind of on fire. Everybody wants to get going now. But I think the big impediment, maybe the biggest news for the industry, is supply. And almost the first question that end users will ask us when they approach us, even before they learn about our product, is, how is your supply? So I'm very optimistic, and by the way, we're fine on the supply front. We somehow managed to get everything all lined up. Starting about a year and a half ago, we got our whole build plan and our logistics all organized. So we're in great shape. I'm very optimistic. You know, I would hesitate to say that because I'm not walking in their shoes. I will say that we did a number of what I would say are extraordinary things to assure our continuity of supply. We put things on the shelf, both in terms of raw components and also finished goods, well before the market and our sales plans would have said that we should. We just felt that things were bubbling up, and we thought that the time would come when we would need them, and so we're sitting in a very good place. About China, I would say that we took maybe a little bit of an unusual step, and we've moved out of China. We were at a contract manufacturer there, and we've moved elsewhere in Asia. We still get a number of our components, but a way lesser dependence on China. Well, I actually think that there is the case to be made for maybe not local, but regional manufacturing. And if you think about it, so much of the work now is mechanized. It's robots, it's, no hands-on by humans. And so why is it that things should be sourced from just a single location? So when it was so much human input to the assembly, I think maybe China had some advantage. But if you look now where jobs are being lost in China, It's to robots, and it's machines doing their jobs. So I think things are changing, and that's going to prompt a lot of onshoring or nearshoring. So Mexico as an assembly location for North American companies, Canadian and Americans, I think is legitimate. Eastern Europe for European countries and Africa. So I think a lot of companies are rethinking their strategy. Be worried when everybody does the same thing, because the overdependence on a single location sometimes comes home to roost for so many people, and that's never a good thing. Well, the number one thing that we speak about is people. And, there may be certain things that are, being done by technology now, but technology products get imagined by people. And so some of the things like all of the stories about the Great Resignation, we all care very much about retaining our people. We work so hard to attract them, and then to lose them to somebody who's going to, pay a little bit more or a lot more. Some of those things are very, very hard to manage. And so I think people is, that is the topic always at the top of the list. One of the things that we have never done and never said is that we are an AV company. And really, we got to thinking about this a while ago and started asking our staff how they would categorize the company. And, are we IT? And it's not that we don't know, we just wanted to hear what they said. There wasn't a single person who would have categorized us as an AV company. They all think that we're an IT, a technology company. So as I started thinking about it, and that was kind of a validation of a thought process, I think the industry has a little bit of an identity crisis. I think they're kind of holding on to a categorization that may have seen its heyday. And you hear a lot of people talk about their business as being AV-IT. Well, what if you flipped it around and said you're IT with an AV flair, so IT-AV? And, for me, that I think our staff would go along with that. Yeah, we're an IT company with an AV focus, but never AV-IT. Well, maybe that's what AV is, but sort of the volume products that go into every meeting room in a workplace. Maybe that's not AV. Maybe that is IT. And so the industry sort of grabbing on, reaching out its arms and embracing so much. Maybe that's what part of the problem is. And so maybe this is the IT AV sliver. And AV are these big, complex systems that are very expensive, that take a lot of programming, et cetera, et cetera. Maybe that's what AV is. And so the embracing of so much may be actually net detrimental. I think we're heading into a collision with IT, with this industry. I really do. And the types of companies that have come by that have said, hey, we're putting together an MTR and we want to add your product into the bundle, totally different than the conversations 3 years ago. I would have described most of the resellers who would have visited with us as being integrators or AV types, pro AV. Not anymore. It's people who now themselves as resellers are moving more into the IT realm, and then it's a lot of the big IT resellers. So from storefronts that are branching out into selling to corporate America, or it could be telemarketing or just telesales, or inside sales, looking after a lot of these needs. And so they're looking at products that are easy to install, easy to set up, easy to deploy, easy to manage, and where there's no sort of human needed to do all of that, does the technology take care of a lot of what used to need a human? So I see a big sort of identity crisis almost for companies in this space. Socially, I would say that we're in a very tricky circumstance. We've got conditions that are very hard on people. They've been isolated from COVID. They've lost loved ones. So they may have been sick themselves. So that has put a burden on a lot of people. You hear about mental health for children who've been learning at home, or maybe not learning at home. You layer on that inflationary pressures. You add in the war in Ukraine, which is having tremendous impacts outside of that, smallish country or smallish area in Europe. And I would say that socially, we are at a very tricky and very uncertain stage. And so it sounds kind of amazing that I'm so optimistic about where things are headed on a business front. Yes, I recognize, these strong negative winds are blowing out there, but not from the people that we're talking to here at the trade show or outside of Infocom, where they're talking about being prepared, being ready, coming back on a hybrid basis and getting on with business. I guess the one thing that we all need to keep in mind, we wouldn't have existed as humanity if we weren't resilient, if we couldn't adapt, if we couldn't cope and get through some pretty harsh things. So I'm pretty optimistic that we're going to be able to do that, even as on an individual level we're going to have some trying times ahead, I'm sure.